Okay. And we are live now. So we'll just wait another minute or so just to give everyone a chance to come on because, you know, Sunday morning people slowly roll in. Hello, Miriam Hendelis. Welcome. We're just asking everyone to keep your video off so that we just have the three people on the screen. So forgive us if we turn off your video for you.
Hi, Rabbi Korobkin.
Nice to hear your voice, Miriam. Yeah, of course. Good to have you.
Responding back to your greeting.
Thank you. Thank you. Please send my very best to Abe's when you speak to him, okay?
Okay.
Thank you. All right.
Okay.
So good morning, everybody, and Shavua Tova Gutvach. And welcome to another Sunday morning get-together at the Bayit for a nice discussion and to meet some really interesting people. Today, I'm very privileged to be able to have a little schmooze with two very special ladies who are very articulate and are doing wonderful work for I guess, Normal Frum Women, which is the name of their podcast. I welcome Rivki Silver and Alex Fleksher. And so let me tell you a little bit about them, and then we'll get started talking. Rivki Silver is a writer, speaker, and musician. Her writing has been featured on many Jewish websites, including Aish.com, Jew in the City, Between Carpools, and Kveller.com. As a speaker, she has spoken to a range of audiences from high schools to Project Inspire Shabbatons. A classically trained musician, she has performed with orchestras and chamber ensembles, but also enjoys playing piano for local day school events. She lives in Cleveland with her family. Welcome, Rivki Silver. And Alex Fleksher is an educator, speaker, and op-ed columnist for Mishpacha magazine. She has also written for the Jerusalem Post, the Forward, OU.org, Cross Currents, and Klal Perspectives. She holds an MS in Jewish education and a BA in English communications. As a member of the OU Speakers Bureau, Alex has spoken for shuls and schools around the country. She lives in Cleveland with her family. So the Tzad Hashava, the commonality between the two of you, you're both part of the glorious Cleveland Jewish community, our neighbors to the west a little bit. I think you get more snow than we do because you get the lake effect, the mistake by the lake, as they call it. But we also share the fact that we are Midwestern neighbors, and we're delighted to welcome you to Toronto, at least virtually. Welcome, ladies. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thrilled to be here.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So now the reason why I reached out to both of you is because I happened to come across, I'm not sure how, I was listening to my podcast channel on my iPhone one day, and I came across this podcast called Normal Frum Women. I was very intrigued, and I listened to one of your episodes, and I was very impressed. I mean, I thought that this was just the premise of Normal Frum Women. So the name of the podcast is very new, by the way, just started in January, but it's got three names. Women, I think I understand, although in today's world where nothing is binary, we have to perhaps define women as well. But hopefully for our audience, women is clear. But I'd like to ask you to define what normal means and what frum means. And in the context of doing that, if you could, please explain to us what inspired you to start this podcast, and why do you feel it's an important contribution to the conversation about what it means to be an Orthodox Jew in the 21st century, at least in North America where we live, please.
Oh, okay, well, Rivki and I had a lot of discussion about what we wanted to call this podcast. Rivki actually reached out to me asking if I'd like to be involved, and I think for both of us, this was really a bucket list rather of things like to accomplish. You know, we're both writers. We have a lot of commonalities, actually. We're both very involved in our, community here in Cleveland. And writers, I think this made a lot of sense for both of us. I have a column in Mishpacha magazine. I like to address issues in the Frum communal world. I think it's important to sort of be a mouthpiece to the average Frum person and raise issues that are on their minds. So that's exactly really what we're doing with our podcast. And this made a lot of sense for me as to, something as a venture that I like to do. So Normal Frum Woman, we laughed when we hit on this name because we felt it was a little tongue in cheek. Rivki, why don't you go ahead and discuss why we chose it and why we love it and the reaction that we got to it, because actually it was quite mixed.
Right. It was very interesting. So we were when we started the process of discussing how we wanted to proceed with this podcast and all of the prep work, the many, many, many months of prep work that went into before we even rolled out in January. And we were just spitballing different name ideas. We wanted it to be obvious that it was Jewish, but we didn't want it to be too overtly Jewish. We wanted it to be, subtle, but also obvious, which that's always tricky. And so we were just throwing out different names, this name, that name, that name. And we said, well, we want the podcast to really cover topics that are just relevant to normal Frum women. And then we said, oh, I think that's it. I think that's the name, because really we're exploring all of the topics that are relevant to just your average, regular, normal, quote unquote, although we did talk about how deeply subjective that particular word is in our first episode. And Frum, anyone who's observant, and then women, like you said, women.
So I just want to pick up on that word normal for a second, because that was really the topic of your first episode. And I thought it was fascinating. There is this tug that we all feel to conform. For some people, especially in my community, I've heard it like looking over your right shoulder, and specifically your right shoulder, because there seems to be more of a tug that, or a kind of social pressure that many of us feel that we're being judged, or we're being expected to live according to a certain standard in the Orthodox community. Is that what you mean by normal? And can you explain why normalcy is important? Perhaps, there would be benefits of being a little bit abnormal in today's world.
Absolutely.
Please elaborate on that.
Literally what you're saying is exactly the root of a lot of the pushback that we got on social media. And in the end, that was really great for us, because it gave us the opportunity to explain what we mean. And that pushback included, oh, I don't see myself as normal Frum woman. I see myself a normal Frum woman. I see myself as out of the box. I feel like I'm a nonconformist, whatever that image that a lot of women have with what we're meant to be or meant to look like, or they felt a lot of it was what we were purporting and what we were trying to define. And this podcast clearly is not for me because I'm a normal Frum woman. Turn the page. And actually that was precisely the opposite of what we were trying to accomplish. We're sort of making fun of it, like we're normal Frum women. We are the mouthpiece for average Frum women. And the definition and the discussion that we had in the episode was that normal is how you define it, plus the pulls of conformity that we have as members of an Orthodox society, because we live in a very close-knit society, and is going to present challenges in terms of how we define the word. But it's trying to encourage women to embrace what is normal for them, what works for them, for their families, while also acknowledging that, yes, conformity does play a role as members of the Orthodox community.
And how do the two of you deal with that expectation of conformity, and what kind of balance do you feel is healthy?
That's a great question. Well, like I was joking around with Alex when we were talking about the name, when I shared with my husband the name that we were using to do the podcast, like he said, like Rivki, neither you or Alex are necessarily normal. Like this concept of what is normal, what is not normal. I think I'm pretty standard. At the same time, my background is very not standard. I have certain skill sets that are very not normal. Like I know how to play the clarinet on a very high level, which that's not something that's typical. But at the same time, I'm still making cholent on Shabbos, so maybe that's typical. And just kind of coming to a acceptance of all of the different components that are in my life, and embracing the things that are maybe a little bit out of the box, but at the same time, recognizing that there is a certain freedom in being in the box, and there's a certain power to being out of the box in the way, and just being self-aware enough to acknowledge where we want to push the line and where it doesn't really matter to push the line. That's just my own personal experience.
And what is considered over the line?
Well, that depends. It depends on your community, depends on your family, depends on your own personality, and I think it depends on your own comfort level with how it is. I know that we quoted Ellie Chevalis, who's a psychotherapist, and she had said that, you know, if you're concerned about what's normal or not, then if your normal is negatively impacting your life or the life of people who you love in some way, then maybe that is a time to assess if it's pushing the boundary a little bit too far. Like, do a cost benefit analysis. Like, if it's causing tension in your life and in your family's life and in your own life, if you're having a lot of angst about it, then maybe that's a time to reassess if that is something that is maybe too far over the boundary, and to say, is this something that, you know, is this a thing that is out of the box that is unique to my own neshama, my own purpose, my own tafkid in my role as a Jewish woman? Or is this something where I'm just like pushing the boundary because I'm feeling a little bit, you know, like I just want to push the boundary? There's different roles of being out of the box, and we have to, I think, be honest with ourselves about what our motivations are.
If we can speak theologically for a moment, I mean, there's this natural tension that exists within each and every one of us. Being created b'tselem Elokim means that I feel unitary. I feel like the ultimate individual, different and distinct from everyone else, because I feel godlike in a certain way. But at the same time, I'm also expected to be part of a national identity, a national group that requires me to conform to a certain degree to be able to be homogenized with the rest of the collective. And the neshama feels both of those attractions, and it's pulled in opposite directions. And probably the unhealthy part is if we sort of allow the unique parts of ourselves to get lost in the collective because we feel like we have no choice. I know that you spoke a lot about external garb as a part of the way that we can sometimes lose ourselves or feel that we need to conform. I know, you know, for men especially, it's the black and white dress that becomes a call of conformity. And I think it's easier for men perhaps to homogenize their external garb. But I think for women, correct me if I'm wrong, I think women feel a greater need for expression of the external appearance. Is that true? Or?
Yeah, I would agree. I would definitely agree. And we have more, even in the boundaries of tzniut, so many ways that we can express sexuality. But I think clothing also poses a challenge, especially in the frum world, is there is a lot of conformity. There are a lot of expectations, depending on, you know, what community you live in terms of what types of clothes you're wearing, what brands you're wearing, you know, how, you know, if you're updating your wardrobe every season. And that's what I tried to get into in the episode, are these unique stressors, these unique conflicts of being able, but also, you know, not wanting to people feel like they don't want to look like a nebuch. They don't want to look like they're like total social outfit. At what point then do we say, but wait a minute, you know, these purchases don't fit with my budget, or this doesn't align with my personality? I think as women in the frum community, we're really torn, particularly in this you know, in this idea of clothes even.
Alex, I'm sorry, we're just having a little bit of problem with your broadband, so
Sorry.
I'm not sure. I just wanted to let you know if there's a way for you
Thanks.
to improve it. Okay. Anyway, listen, one of your most recent episodes, I think it was your second episode, you talked about, you know, the normal challenge is the balance between being part of a Jewish community and being part of a larger society in the context of social media. And I know that that's a constant struggle with so many people who are drawn to a religious identity and exposing themselves more to what's out there in social media, which many times is very helpful, but is also sometimes provides us with ideas that are antithetical to our Yiddishkeit. And everyone comes to their own sense of balance. And there are people that you interviewed on your show that felt that social media was off limits for them as a Frum person, but it seems like you have taken a different approach. Could you comment on that, please?
You want to take it, Alex?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you mentioned that we did include someone on the show that felt that social media was not where they wanted to direct their efforts. This experience social media, experience the pros and experience the cons, and felt totally liberated when she shut everything out. And we were very much about embracing individuality and embracing everyone's normal, back to the previous episode. And I just think it's very important to acknowledge that there's no right or wrong here. People need to do what's healthy for them. And that is the key word, healthy. Now, in terms of our embrace of social media, Rivki and I are not perfect. There's no question that we struggle with, healthy consumption and healthy usage. And that's what we said in the beginning, is that anything has pros and cons. Anything has, challenges and benefits. And social media, I think, is just one example that's so how do we say, we're so entrenched in it, and has such potential for such good and such bad. And it's something that we're constantly grappling with. But I'm proud of both of us for taking this medium. And, as I said, we're both writers, we're both involved in having more of like a global message and, reaching out beyond our communities, our messages. And I think I would feel that Hashem is happy with, this decision. We're trying to use this for the good, trying to use this to empower women, to inspire women, to uplift women, and men, but generally to contribute to the Jewish community in this way.
Absolutely. And I think I actually was just having a conversation with someone a couple of weeks ago who was telling me, someone I was catching up with, and she was telling me how she was having such angst with her WhatsApp. She said, I just don't know what to do. On the one hand, there's so many mitzvos, there's so many chasadim that I'm doing, that I'm seeing, opportunities to make meals, opportunities to do a chesed that I'm seeing from this chat. At the same time, sometimes people post things and it just makes me not like people. And she said, and I'm a person who likes people, but I don't like people now, and I don't know what to do. And I really empathized with her. There was, also I had an experience where I went off Facebook for, I think, about 6 months, because I also was having that feeling where I was so frustrated with like people who I didn't even know. I got into a conversation with someone online. It was like Hanukkah, not this Hanukkah, the one before. And I was having like a argument, if you'll say so, a disagreement. And I was thinking to myself, what am I doing? Is this what I'm using social media for, to argue with another Jew on Hanukkah? Like, what is this? This doesn't even make any sense. And
it never ends well. It never ends well.
It never does. It never does. This is MS.
One of the things that I've shared with my congregants is that even though I'm on social media every day, it's to use it as a tool for educating people, because as an educator, I want to be able to find the largest audience possible. But I've asked members of my congregation to consider carefully before they post either a family simcha, a birth, their latest meal at a restaurant, or whatever they're going to be posting. By and large, and please, if you feel I'm mistaken, let me know. Most of the time, the people who are looking at your social media feed either are not interested in your latest family event or your latest meal, or may actually feel a sense of jealousy or resentment for your posting those things. And so I've personally felt that those things are not helpful to be posted on social media. But if you post things that provoke people to think about ideas in life, about religious concepts or philosophical concepts, that's a helpful way of using social media to be able to provide things for people to think about and to discuss. That's helpful. But I don't find the aspect of social media as far as, personal celebrations to be particularly helpful. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean,
Sorry, go ahead. You go ahead, Alex.
Sorry. I was thinking, I'm thinking about the people who are not using it as a tool to educate or to share Jewish ideas. People who are not educators, then what role do they have? And that litmus test is that we ask ourselves, what is our intention when we post? So if we really deep down think and say, I'm really posting this to show off because I feel like I need recognition or I need validation, whatever that post may be, whether it's the birthday celebration with your husband at a fancy restaurant or, even something not as show offy, always about intention. And I think that really is a game changer. And I think that helps us use social media in a more healthy way.
But even if with the greatest of intentions, what if the end result is, and I may be oblivious to the fact that people begrudge me for having the most amazing vacations and the most amazing anniversary celebrations, and there may be some of my contemporaries who don't have as good of a marriage as I do, or don't have as beautiful children as I do, or don't have children. And what am I accomplishing thereby? And even if my intention is to share this with my beloved friends who I know will be happy for me, what about the other hundreds of people who will see it and will not be?
So this is a really excellent point. I think that it depends on how someone is using social media. When I first started in social media and I was only friends with people who I was friends with, so then I was happy to share pictures of my kids. I saw pictures of their kids, and it was a genuine source of just like enjoyment of each other's nachas. But then as my writing career grew and I was friends with people who have never met, who I don't even know, so then I had to recalibrate the way the sharing is. I have friends who still share pictures of their kids or whatever, and I enjoy seeing that. I enjoy seeing their simchas, my friends who I don't connect with, who I'm not as good at keeping up with. So I think there is definitely a place for that, and we can't necessarily control the way someone is going to react emotionally to our posts. And while we 100% need to be sensitive to that, and I completely agree with what Alex said about what is the intention, I feel like that is so important. At the same time, I think it's also important to acknowledge that if someone is going to feel jealous and is going to whatever, that's also their own emotional work to do. And maybe they need to also consider the way that they're using social media. So it's a matter of being sensitive, but at the same time, knowing that if you're doing it with a small group of people that then that's more like having a close-knit chat. Now, if for people who aren't educators, or like my mom, who is only friends with the people who she actually knows, for instance, so she has a very different usage than I do. And also, as far as like the more banal posting, like the meals and stuff like that. So I think for sure, like I agree with like posting fancy dates, posting things about marriage. Marriage is so tricky. And I always like to post a disclaimer whenever I'm posting anything about my family, like, just so you know, remember that social media is not real life. That beautiful picture you see of a couple on a beautiful date, you don't know if they were fighting the entire way in the car on the way to the date. We don't know the whole picture, and social media is not real life. And that's something that I think is very, very important to keep in mind. I'm speaking to myself here, so many times I've seen things and I have to remember it's not the whole picture. But I have many times shared like a meal that I'm making for my family. I'll post it on my Instagram stories or something, and it's completely banal. It seems even maybe insipid. But then I get some messages from my friends. They said, oh, that's a great idea. Now I'm going to make that for dinner because I had no idea what I was making for dinner. So there is still a tuelis, even in the things that seem like maybe kind of silly. But I agree that it's a matter of balancing what our intention is and being sensitive to the needs of others, but at the same time, not necessarily letting that completely dictate our social media usage.
Yeah, we seem to have lost Alex temporarily. So Alex, please, please come back on whenever you can. I knew her internet connection was a little bit unstable, but I'm sure she'll be coming back shortly. So let me continue with you, Rivki, and ask you, the next episode, your most recent episode was, again, we're seeing a pattern here in this podcast. It's all about creating a healthy balance. Normal. What is normal? It's the balance between conformity and individualism. Social media. What is the correct balance? How much am I on it and how much am I letting it consume me? And then your last podcast was about, again, the question of balance, which is maintaining a healthy personal life and at the same time being a volunteer and contributing to my Jewish community and providing services and doing chesed and all of these other things. So can you just comment on that, please?
Absolutely. Alex and I are both very, very involved in the community here, both very involved in volunteering for different projects. Like Alex had mentioned earlier, we're both involved in the Shabbos project for years in various capacities. And also Alex created this event in Cleveland called the Chizuk Retreat, which was designed to be mechazek women in the Cleveland community, from women, to kind of bolster them up, because we all need extra connection. This is even before the pandemic. People still were craving connection and craving inspiration and craving a way to connect. And so we're involved in creating this retreat and bringing in speakers and making it happen, and all of the logistics that come with that, and just various volunteer roles. But oh, here we go. Alex is
Got you
Thanks.
back, Alex. Okay, good.
I was just talking about the Chizuk Retreat. We're talking about the third episode, how to say no without feeling guilty. And we were just exploring the ways that we feel the achrayus to volunteer, but at the same time, being realistic about sometimes we really need to be more of the mindset of chesed starts at home, and make sure that the obligations that we have in our home are also being met before we look out, and the acknowledgement that these needs are going to shift with time, and the constant need to reassess and to be aware of how much koyach we have, and to be able to say no, and not just in a volunteer capacity, even in interpersonal relationships, saying no, to a family member or to some sort of other interpersonal obligation. It's not even strictly for volunteer boundaries.
Okay, so you want to give us some examples as far as how is a person supposed to know when they're out of whack, when they're out of sync, as far as creating that correct balance?
I think it's usually, Alex, do you want to take this one? Are you?
Yeah, I can just speak for myself. I think that the experience of burnout can be an indicator that we've done too much, that we haven't delegated properly, that we're juggling too many balls. And when we have those candid discussions with the people that we love, and I had that experience after working very intensely on the Shabbos project as the chair, bringing it to Cleveland, notching it up to a new level, and speaking to my children and said, what do you guys think? Do you think I should do this next year? And not that I'm going to let them make the decisions as to my involvement in a particular project or not, but it's just insightful to hear, we felt like you were distracted, or you were, too busy, or whatever it may be. And then use that as information and helping us make decisions as to what projects and things we're going to be involved in.
Okay. So as I was mentioning to Rivki while you were off temporarily, your podcast seems to be forming a pattern that it's all about balance. So first of all, I guess part A of my next question is, so what are the other issues that you plan to be discussing over the next several weeks and months on your podcast? And part B of my question, and you don't have to, you can choose to answer it as you feel you'd like. It's a bit of a sensitive question. We live in a 21st century North American Orthodox community, Frum community, and it's very varied. There's no homogeneity at all within the Frum community. There's many, many different stripes. And I wanted to ask you, what do you feel that we're getting right? And what do you feel is out of sync currently that needs to be calibrated or recalibrated? So
Wow.
those are two parts.
It's actually interesting you asked that last question, because we have a segment on every episode where we like to put a spotlight on a quote unquote normal Frum woman, just a regular person, doesn't need to be a social media influencer or famous person. And we asked the same 5 questions, and the last question is exactly that. It's what do you want to, how do we phrase it, Rivki? Like, what do you want to see more of in the Frum world?
What do you think the Frum world, what do you think the Frum world needs more of?
Right. What do you think?
Yeah.
And it's been amazing to hear the response. But in terms of episodes, we'll first address the first part of your question. So as we said, we want to be relevant. We want to validate. We want to be a mouthpiece for women. We want women to hear us. And I think this model is like a little, the whole podcast model, we're regular people, we're not Rebbitzins. In many communities, the focus is learning top down on, the Rebbitzin or the rabbi's wife, and, they're the ones that inspire us. But here, we're regular people. And I think many women feel validated by just hearing through our discussions. Someone said it's like sitting with you guys having coffee together. What are our thoughts about things? And also bringing in the experts and the psychologists and the Rebbitzins to share their ideas. So obviously, we have a really exciting episode coming. Our next one, we come out every 2 weeks. We're really going to be exploring the idea and the concept of the Rebbitzin and Orthodox communal life. And we are interviewing, I'll share it here for those of you who are listening. We're interviewing Rebbitzin Chami Haber, who is Rebbitzin in Norfolk, Virginia, 90 families, and Rebbitzin Yocheved Goldberg at Boca Raton Synagogue, 900 families, and really addressing the role of Rebbitzin in the community. Great advice for those women who feel like they don't have a Rebbitzin. We're going to be talking, of course, before Pesach. There's a woman, Meira Spivak, who just came out. She's the director of NCSY in Oregon, who just came out with a new book about how to make Pesach in 5 days, and deal with, whether it's parenting, marriage, juggling, unique issues from women. I love to do a topic we've discussed, tackling tznius, just so people can just sort of hear a fresh take based on our insights, but also based on people who we really want to highlight and share. Any other good topics, Rivki? What are some fun things we're doing?
I know that you had mentioned the idea of like ambition, like professional, spiritual, personal ambition. Yeah, of course, juggling the ideas. There's also, I have a few of our listeners had wanted to write about, listeners had asked maybe to address, for girls who are, or young women who are home from seminary, but they're still waiting to decide what to do with their life, so to speak, and how do they connect, and then how do people connect in general, and then online communities versus in-life communities. And I've had a few Baalei Tshuva also write in and say, like, just about learning how to actually be from, you got inspired, you changed your life, but now what about the actual details? Like, how do you exactly say Shema with your kids at night? What are you supposed to do?
Yeah, that's a really important topic, because when we talk about the need to conform versus individualism, I think it's a completely different ballgame with Baalei Tshuva, and so many, so the psychology of the Baal Tshuva is very different from the what they call the FFB, right? Sorry to interrupt. Yeah.
Even the same idea applies to, we want to do an episode on in town versus out of town. Conformity has different pressures based on where you live. Another topic, very instrumental. I know Diana Melnick out in Toronto, there's a lot of progress that's being made in the Kala classes, teaching about intimacy before marriage. So we just have a lot of ideas. I need to start taking some of these ideas and actually using them to write about as columns in my magazine, because in the magazine, we're just very excited to really, shed some light on some of these issues.
Absolutely. And something that we had discussed when we were first starting to work on the podcast, and that other people have echoed to me, is that, it's one thing to be able to explore these topics in writing, which both Alex and I enjoy. Alex, from an op-ed perspective, I tend to do the more personal essay to provide validation and connection. That's my style more.
Sounds like a normal Frum household over there.
That's my toddler. But a lot of women that we know, they said, like, we like reading the articles, but we just don't have the time that we want to sit and read. But you can listen to something when you're folding laundry, or when you're commuting, or when you're washing dishes, or when you're taking a walk. You can listen in ways that you can't read. So it's a wonderful way to explore topics that we will explore in our writing, but then to explore it in a completely different medium. And it's a completely different experience. And I get such a kick out of that.
My wife is a normal Frum Rebbitzin, and she's very, she doesn't like to come on the screen, but she suggested that I ask you the following questions. Number one, you had raised this a moment ago, Rivki, about seminary girls who come back from Israel. And do you feel there's a role for them to get more guidance when they come back from Israel to on a spiritual high, and bring them back down to earth um, uh, what would you say is the right way to guide a young woman who's looking to emerge in her community and looking for a shidduch and things like that? And also maybe a session, maybe a podcast on shidduchim would be very, very helpful in general.
Absolutely.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's an amazing question. I feel completely unqualified to answer.
Well, you went to seminary and came back on a high, right? How long does it last?
I mean, yeah, it's different though, because like I didn't go to a base Yaakov and then go to seminary straight out. I didn't grow up from. So I came back, and I always like to say, like, my husband had been from for many, many, many more years than I had. Like, I wasn't even from when he started dating. I said, I'm sorry I kept you waiting for so long. But he was much more normal by the time, like, I was still flying high. I was still like, I'll keep every chumrah, whatever chumrah you want, I'll keep it. And he already had been from for a long time. That's an exaggeration. I wasn't really like that, but I was very like jazzed up. And so there was that kind of balancing out. Whereas maybe if I had met someone who was still like on the same level, it would have been a different reality. So I don't know. It's a very tricky question, because that inspiration and that high is amazing and priceless, and can really fuel a couple through the kind of slog of, if Bezer Hashem, they have children right away, and to get into the reality of having, Baruch Hashem, many small people who are not necessarily interested in how well you can read a Ramban, and they don't, your toddlers don't really care about Meforshim, but, and then maybe a person is working too. And so to take that inspiration, it can really take a person a long way into the vagaries of the real world, so to speak. So I don't know if bringing it down is the thing, but at the same time, I understand the question of making sure that hashkafically everything is on a realistic plane when they are getting married. I don't know. It's tricky. That's not really an answer, but those are my thoughts.
Okay. One of the issues where, I personally feel that there may be some level of imbalance is the challenge of dealing with wealth in society today. And we as a Frum community are consumers just like every other segment of society. There's this new men's magazine that's been advertised, that's supposed to be coming out, called Machers. And it's a magazine about consumption of what to consume at Kiddush clubs and single malt scotch and cigars and things like that. And to me, when I saw it, I thought it was a parody. I thought it was
too. Is it really real?
Yeah, it seems like it's a real website. No, I don't think it's Purimshtick. I mean, if it is, they went to a tremendous amount of effort to create a really good Purimshtick, because they've got a website talking about how it's coming soon. But there does seem, and I'm speaking as a man, there does seem to be an unhealthy emphasis in some corners, and it's got nothing to do with hashkafa as far as right left, I don't think, but there seems to be sometimes an emphasis on consumerism. And is that something that you feel comfortable tackling as normal Frum women?
Oh, I would love to talk about that. I will just say about that magazine, to me, that's the reflection, the male version of what's going on Instagram, is that Instagram female culture is so much. I talk about it. I just wrote a piece about the fuzzy math that in mishpacha, how actually things add up at the end of the month from families, just on a regular basis, with regular, plus, as you're saying, Rabbi Kropkin, all of the additional, high standards of living that have just become morphed its way into societal norms. Going on, everything is photographed and imported culture. And, everyone's taking pictures of their enormous, fancy meals that they're putting together for simchas or for Shava Brachos, and the outfits and the kids, and it's just constant. So when when you're telling me about this magazine, it's like, oh, this is just the male version.
And is there a way to address it? It seems like the cat's out of the bag, and there's only so much power that anytime Rabbanim have made an attempt from top-down management to try and limit the size of a simcha, or to try and influence the general community to tone it down a bit, those efforts have fallen flat.
Yeah.
What are we supposed to do about it?
So I like to follow up with this, because this is literally Rivki, I don't know if you read the letters this week.
Of course.
So this week had the conversation continues to my piece on fuzzy math. And in my piece, I didn't provide solutions. I wasn't discussing answers. I wrote it in a way to be provocative, for people to think and recognize this problem. And for them to, I would love to see, like, how do people write in? What are their ideas? And reading people's responses to this particular issue, I would like to provide just a response that I didn't get right particularly in my piece, but just in this conversation. And I think it comes back to the first things we were discussing today, is the power of individuality. And I think that we need to reclaim that in the Frum community. I think we need to reclaim being confident about, this is how we do things in our family. This is how I do things. This is what I believe in. And it is so hard to turn our heads away from what everyone else is doing and how down, and the way the cars that people are driving, and the way people are making simchas, and how they're dressing their kids, and how they're dressing themselves. But there's something, because we live in such a close-knit community, and because we are, our neighbors are of all socioeconomic backgrounds, and regular communities, you're not living with people who, one person's on a teacher's salary and the other person's a millionaire. These people don't normally interact with each other, and that is community. But what's also very unique is we feel tremendous pressure by what everyone else is doing, because we are so close-knit and because there's so much socialization. And I think the more we can reclaim being confident and what we need to do for our bank accounts, what for our families, what's healthy for our emotional health, the more confident we can be, the more we can really turn our head away from what other people are doing.
Okay. There are a couple of questions that have started to form in the chat, and I want to invite anyone who would like to ask some questions to do so. Alex, this is for you. You're a columnist, as you mentioned, in Mishpacha magazine, and it's a very, very popular publication. It's a bit of a delicate question, because we know that Mishpacha has faced some criticism for, at least in its print version, for not featuring women's faces. And I just wanted to ask you, without, this is not the intention is not to be critical or bash. The question is, we understand that there are considerations, but is this, how do you create that balance between tzniut on the one hand, female modesty, and at the other hand, expressing yourself as a woman, emerging in the 21st century as someone who has a very, very clear contribution to make to both Klal Yisrael and the world as a whole? And if you could just, just reflect on how you've created that balance yourself.
So do you want me to touch on the woman in pictures question? Is that what the person's asking, or it's broader than that?
Well, that the person raised it in the context of the women's faces, but
yeah.
But I want to give you the liberty to take in whatever direction you'd like.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I think the woman in faces issue, let's go straight for the jugular. It concerns me. It concerns me as a practice, since we know, historically speaking, with other publications such as, the Jewish Observer, we've had pictures of women. We have pictures of women in art scroll books. It's not usher, and it concerns me when those words are being bandied about, that it's a halachic issue of, and that is one of the one of the main things that concerns me about this issue. When there aren't pictures of women, is that the emes in terms of a halachic definition? But one way where I think the conversation has gone is there's so much emphasis on the pictures of the woman. And my feeling is very strongly, well, sure, I would love to have my headshot next to Jonathan Rosenblum. It's Eitan Kobri, Jonathan Rosenblum, they have their headshots, Alexander Fleksher, and there's, stock pic. Yes, on one hand, I would like a certain even playing field, if you will, but also just to, that there isn't anything particularly wrong on terms of its halachic level of seeing a headshot of a person. But on the same hand, I also feel that with this emphasis of focusing on the faces, where the discussion also very much needs to be, what about the voices of women? Meaning if I was going to be like a total ideologue and say, I'm sorry, I refuse to write for Mishpacha magazine because they won't put my headshot in, just as many people refuse to buy these magazines, and that's their prerogative. But as a writer, I feel like what I would be doing then is I'd be losing both my face and I'd be losing my voice. And right now I have to choose. I can't have both. And I choose my voice over my face. And that honestly, to me, is the biggest reflection. The best reflection of the essence of who I am as a person is I can share with you my thoughts. I can share with you my ideas. I can share it with you on this platform. And isn't that, even if I had to choose, I rather that than just, and then just a picture of who I am and what I look like. That is shallow. So that's a choice that I have to make. And I am very, I feel very privileged, and I feel like it's a huge responsibility to be able to have that voice in on this global platform. But it is definitely a very heartfelt struggle. And my heart goes out to women who feel disenfranchised, the 6-year-old girl who can't have her picture in the magazine when she sends, her project. That was something that was going viral this week on social media. And I hear for the magazines, if you don't mind, if I just put this in, it's very hard. It's very hard for them to set these guidelines, to make these cutoffs when they feel, and I've heard Ellie Paley say this as the publisher of the magazine, Mishpacha is going to lose out on key segments of the Orthodox community if they start printing pictures. So it is more important that they have the voices of their writers, both male and female, out there, than, because many communities will feel like it's absolutely treif if there are pictures of women and they will not put into their home, then they lose that platform, then they lose that opportunity to bring up such crucial matters and issues to the Jewish world.
Rivki, same answer?
Yeah, I agree with Alex.
Okay.
A lot easier that way.
Let me share a certain irony just as a follow-up. With all of the disappearance of the pictures in the magazines, there's been a proliferation of pictures in shidduch resumes. And that seems to be, and not only the faces, but full body, because the guys now need to know that she's a size 0 or size 1 or whatever the size. I don't even know what sizes there are anymore. But what is something awry? Is something unbalanced there? And how do we address it?
Well, for sure, it's an imbalance. I mean, if just exactly as you stated it, it doesn't make any sense. It's treif in a magazine, but it's not treif in this other way. I don't have any answers for how to balance it. I have to echo what Alex said earlier about the, keeping up with the Cohens situation too. Obviously the top-down method is not necessarily as effective as we would like it to be. If there was a ban or whatever, I don't think that it would be particularly effective, but it's going to have to be more of a grassroots initiative. And hopefully by, talking about these issues, like in Rabbi Ephraim Goldberg's piece in Mishpacha also, and then the Kichels, of course, picked it up so cleverly, as they always do in their comic in Mishpacha, like that social commentary of like, this is not so necessarily kosher, you guys, we need to think about this. But again, change is usually relatively slow, and it takes strength to be the person to say no. And it's hard and it's scary, but that's the kind of effort that I think is that's the only thing that's going to really work, is just everyone being that, what is it, Nachshon ben Amidav, you know what I'm talking about, to be able to take that step and to say, so this is, when there is a quote unquote normal practice, which is not necessarily healthy, like we had said in our first episode, you can have something that's normal, that does not necessarily mean that it's healthy or good. There are a lot of normal things that are normal that are actually unhealthy. And so it does take strength to step out and say, well, this is a thing that's normal, but it's actually not something that's healthy. It's not something that's good. And so I'm going to take a risk, and I'm going to put myself out on a limb, and I'm going to say, no, I'm not doing this. And I guess, like, if you want to get philosophical, if you want to get spiritual about it, you can say, like, if you're doing the right thing, like HaKadosh Baruch Hu will help you. It's really hard and scary to have that level of bitachon. I don't know, but that's just my, those are my 2 cents about that.
As someone who's just a little bit older than the two of you, by a few years, I would tell you that some of the angst that you're experiencing and your effort in trying to create that balance between conformity and individualism is something that as we get older, maybe into our late 40s and 50s and beyond, we start to feel more comfortable in our own skin, and we don't feel that same pressure to conform as much as it was in the past. And I guess I would salute the both of you and encourage you to continue to try to be the trendsetters instead of the trend followers. There's always a benefit in being melamed zchus, which is the Hebrew term for defending a certain communal practice, because there's a concept in the Talmud of hanach lahem liYisrael, that let the Jewish people be im lav neviim heim b'nei neviim heim, because if we're not prophets, we're the descendants of prophets. And so therefore many of the things that we do, even if they don't have a reliable source or origin point for them, perhaps there's something there, that's, but on the other hand, there are certain distortions that have crept into a religious system that has existed for millennia. And despite our best efforts to conform and to be faithful to a Masorah, there are things that have crept in that we have to acknowledge are distortions, and to create that balance again between limud zchut, between defending a community, and at the same time looking at ourselves carefully in the mirror and noticing our blemishes and trying to rectify those blemishes, is a very, very difficult balance. And I'm hoping that your communication with the public through your social media platforms, through your writings, through your podcasts, will be able to strike that correct balance between, on the one hand, remaining faithful to the community and defending the beauty of the community, and at the same time helping us shine a light on what needs improvement and what needs to be fixed. But I guess my last question, and then we'll, again, if anyone has a question, please raise it in the chat, is can you comment a little bit on how this pandemic has in any way revealed certain things about the Frum community, both good, bad, and ugly?
Wonderful question. I think that before the pandemic, our community has been struggling with the idea of connectedness. I know in 2012, Call Perspectives, the journal edited by Moish Bain, who is now the president of the OU, did a whole issue on the challenge of connectedness, how the Jewish people, the Frum community, is feeling less and less connected to Judaism, to their community, to Israel, and how that's impacting our daily, religious observance. And if you could imagine if that was an issue in 2012 and 2020 and 2021, where so many of us are physically separated from our community and isolated, how we're going to be struggling with that. So I feel that between conversations with people, many very exacerbated for women who, and this has been all over, secular media, the challenge for women, whether they're the ones who typically are having to take off of work to stay home with their kids and, deal with their Zoom homeschooling and taking the brunt of this pandemic, how that's, I think that women in the Frum world, where men may still be going to shul, but the women aren't going to shul because the kids aren't allowed to go to shul, and they're not socializing in the lobby. I think there's a lot of pain. I think there's a lot of women who are feeling so socially disconnected and so religiously disconnected more than ever, because our constructs and our community has disintegrated. And one thing that we did with the Chizuk retreat, unfortunately, I missed that piece as my Zoom cut out, but this, we did a virtual retreat where we had done an in-person retreat. Rivki and I both worked on this, and we do this every year. The virtual retreat, I will tell you, we had, it was a Saturday night through a Sunday night, various Zooms throughout the day, but the connection that took place, everyone had to keep their video on. It was remarkable. And one of the amazing things is we're actually like looking into people's eyes on the Zoom. We're connecting with people face to face, which in a social setting you may not even have. But that really taught me that, to utilize the technology, whether it's the Zoom and getting women together, even if they can't get together in person, or the podcasts. And, we're doing this during Corona, and we feel that there's no better time. We have to continue to reach and strengthen Jewish women, Frum women. They are the root of our families. They are a root of what we're bringing and raising the next generation and passing on to the next generation. And women need it more than ever. Women need it more than ever right now.
Especially women who live in Cleveland, where it's very snowy and it's cold,
Yeah.
and you can't even see someone outside physically. It's not like we're in Florida and you can still see people.
We hibernate anyway in the wintertime. So it's, we just hearing from women like how much that particular Zoom retreat meant and how they needed the chizuk. We had segments from the modern Orthodox world to the really right-wing yeshivish world, and everyone was saying, like, just because you think that we don't need it, because we sent to the most right-wing school in town, we need it. We need the inspiration, we need the connection, we need the learning.
Just really, and the benefit sounds like the socialization was probably the most important benefit of it.
Yes.
And putting it in a Torah context really brought it home.
Yeah, it was amazing. After the retreat had officially ended on Sunday night, it was amazing how many women were still staying on, and people just didn't want to leave. We were still just connecting and just talking, and it was really, really a beautiful event. And one of the things that I appreciated was that because we were all, Zooming in from wherever, so it avoided the thing that happens sometimes at events where people stay into the cliques. They stay who they're comfortable with, the people that they know, their friends who they carpool with, whatever. And so this really allowed people to expand and explore a little bit and maybe get outside of that little comfort zone just a little bit. So it was really, really beautiful. It really surpassed all of our expectations.
Yeah, I mean, it's great food for thought that every Jewish community should try to create these platforms, even just to shoot the breeze, because like last week we had a town hall meeting to talk about what we were going to do for Megillah reading on Purim. But I think for, it was a very, very strongly attended event, but simply because people, and unlike today's discussion where it's just the three faces, we wanted everyone to turn on their video cameras so that we could all see each other and just reconnect, because it's such a vital human need to be part of a larger community. Well, we're almost at the end of the hour, and I just wanted to say thank you to the two of you for all the great work that you're doing. Please continue to stay normal and Frum. And I really look forward to hearing about your future programs and all of the good tutelage that you can provide to so many of us out there. Not only the women, but sometimes the men as well need that kind of guidance. And Hashem should keep you both strong and with the proper perspective, and to continue to stand by your convictions, because that's ultimately what Hashem wants us to do. We believe is that within the confines of Torah, to forge our own unique paths and to try to create that sense of balance that you are so much trying to follow. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today. To Alex and to Rivki, two normal Frum women, thank you so much. And everyone have a wonderful rest of the week. Shavua Tov, everyone. Any parting words, Rivki and Alex?
Well, I like to see a normal Frum men podcast.
All right, so we have to find them first. I'm sure they're out there somewhere.
They are out there.
Yeah. All right. And once again, if people want to look for your podcast, where can they find it?
They can find it anywhere that you listen to podcasts. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. And also, if you don't have a podcast app on your phone, you can go to Anchor, ANCHOR.FM. You can listen straight from your laptop. And
or your phone.
Yeah, exactly. We have an Instagram account and a Facebook account. So we love to connect. We love feedback. We love to hear from normal Frum women or men or anyone.
All right, great. Well, thank you again.
So much. Thank you. It was a
All the best.
pleasure.
Take care now. Bye-bye.